The movers dragged out the television, the clock still ticking, and the paintings my husband once chose. On the sidewalk, neighbors froze, whispering as if watching a public execution. My son Kevin kept his eyes nailed to the floor, not once meeting mine. And Tiffany, smiling like a blade, leaned close to the refrigerator door. "They're for our new place, Eleanor. You don't need them anymore." A pawn ticket, creased and damp from my palm, the day I traded my wedding ring for a tuition bill stamped paid. A trembling 15-year-old boy, fighting back tears the night his father didn't come home. And the promise I made with a voice that didn't shake. "You will not lack while I have breath." Red eyes above a wine-colored dress at graduation. "I never would have made it without you, Mom," he whispered, and I believed him. My mother once told me, "Whoever tends a garden believes in tomorrow." I hadn't tended flowers. I tended a child, with thread, with coffee, with prayers I never realized were prayers. Tomorrow came, and Kevin had a desk job, a paycheck, and a woman whose smile never reached her eyes. The first Sunday, Tiffany crossed my threshold. She scanned the room as though the house itself had coughed on her. "I'm allergic to dust," she announced, though the only dust she bothered to rub was on her fingertip after brushing the mantel. I offered coffee. She asked for imported water. I offered water. She asked for organic green tea. I handed her the tea. She dabbed her palm with a tissue after touching mine. "Mom does alterations," Kevin said, almost apologetic. "How quaint," Tiffany murmured, eyes on my hands. "Cute hobby." "Kevin won't need help anymore." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. Then I stopped laughing because Kevin didn't. You don't notice the rope on your ankle until someone tugs. First, busy weekends. Then unanswered calls. Then came a phrase I had never once used, now hung around my neck. Emotional blackmail. Tiffany said it sweetly, like a diagnosis. She reminds you of the sacrifices, Kevin, to control you. I began to take less space. I spoke fewer words. I folded and refolded the same towels until their edges matched like teeth. A mother's love, I told myself, should be wend at a back, not a wall before a face. But love needs a place to stand. The day Kevin asked about the television, "It's too big for just you, Mom," I felt the ground tilt. When he mentioned the refrigerator, my hand landed on its door without meaning to. His voice sounded borrowed, like a phrase repeated from Tiffany. "You've already lived your life, it's our turn now." If you have ever heard words like that, you are not alone. They sound clean in the air and filthy in the soul. On moving day, Tiffany pulled a sheet of paper from a folder. "Sign here," she said lightly. "Just a note that you're gifting the larger items. Less tax complications." At the bottom, a line waited, bright and expectant. Above it, a list: TV, refrigerator, 2 framed landscapes. "Gifts," Tiffany repeated, and the word did its trick. Gifts are joy. Gifts are voluntary. Gifts are not extorted from a widow by a smile sharp enough to slice paper. "I need to read it," I said. "Of course." Her grin never wavered. The movers lifted the clock while I traced the sentences with my fingertip. Slow enough to buy dignity. Fast enough to avoid making this uglier than it already was. When the last strap snapped shut, Kevin finally looked at me. For a heartbeat, the boy I raised flickered in his eyes, wet and aching. Then his lids lowered. "We'll visit soon," he murmured. That night, I made tea the old way, in a chipped pot. Water boiled and no one walked in. Tea steeped and no one asked for sugar. A kitchen stops being a kitchen quickly when the chair across from you is empty. The doorbell rang. On the mat lay a cream envelope, my name written in careful cursive. I placed it on the table and did not open it. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tonight had already taken too much. I walked the house the way a nurse walks a ward. A rectangle of fresh paint marked where a frame had hung so long, the wall behind it had never aged. The television stand looked embarrassed without its work. A pale square on the linoleum glowed where the refrigerator had stood, colder than any winter. I thought of Susan, my neighbor who brings me roses that smell like Sundays. I thought of the night Kevin turned 15 and we ate cereal at midnight on cold tile because sleep wouldn't come. I thought of the ring I had traded for calculus and the dress I kept because a woman should keep one dress she feels beautiful in. 100 small things can't be loaded onto a truck and yet still manage to leave. You learn what's left when everything else goes. I learned it's the story you decide to tell yourself the morning after, victim or gardener of another kind of soil. At dawn, I bought half a loaf because a whole one felt unfaithful to the space where the refrigerator used to be. Susan touched my elbow. "Are you all right?" she asked, in that way people do when they expect you to lie. "I'm fine," I said, which was true the way a boarded window is fine during a storm. Back home, I finally slit open the envelope with a paring knife. A photograph slid out first. 2 teenagers on a park bench, the boy's hair too long, the girl's smile wider than the future. The paper had gone soft at the edges from being touched too many times. It was me and him, Arthur, before duty, before grief, before life took its toll. Beneath the photo, a letter in careful hand. "Dear Eleanor, I've looked for you for years." I placed it down, palm over my heart like the old instinct when a hymn begins. Not now, I thought. Not yet. You don't throw a rope to a woman who's still learning she is drowning. Before we dive deeper into today's story, don't forget to subscribe to Tangled Heart Stories and ring the bell. Here, you'll always find stories of sacrifice, betrayal, and unexpected turnarounds. Where are you watching from? Share it in the comments. Who knows? The next story might echo your own experience. If you were me, standing in an emptied room with only a photograph of who you used to be, what would you do next? Tiffany didn't storm my life all at once. She seeped in. Like water that finds cracks in the foundation, she tested, pressed, and eventually reshaped the walls I thought were strong. The week after the movers came, she invited the neighbors to a housewarming party. Not at their new house, at mine, or what used to be mine. I stood across the street, clutching a bag of groceries, while balloons bobbed from my own porch railings. Tiffany raised a glass on the steps where Kevin had once tied his shoes for the first day of school. "Fresh start," she chirped. "Kevin's home is open to everyone." No mention of me. I was a ghost watching my own life handed to strangers. Laughter spilled out of windows that had heard my sobbing prayers. When I tried to step closer, Tiffany's glance slid over me like I was part of the pavement. "That night?" Susan whispered. "How can she do that in your house?" I shook my head. It was always Kevin's too. The words tasted like surrender, but deep down, I knew Tiffany was not just decorating a house. She was erasing a history. The next Sunday dinner invitation never came. Kevin used to call, "Mom, come eat with us. Tiffany's making pasta." But now when I dialed, Tiffany's voice answered, "She's resting, Kevin. Don't disturb her with calls. I just wanted to. She knows you love her. That's enough." Click. Days passed like pages you don't read. I walked the neighborhood at dusk, hoping to glimpse Kevin's car. Sometimes I did, parked in their driveway, his silhouette behind curtains drawn shut. Have you ever felt your child's voice disappear from your days like the dial tone cutting off mid-sentence? If you have, you know that silence has weight. One afternoon, Tiffany came alone. She breezed through my door with a folder under her arm, perfume thick enough to announce her before her knock did. "You're still working?" She nodded at the sewing machine. "It pays the bills," I said. "Kevin pays the bills now. You should rest." "I like to work." Her smile thinned. "Or maybe you like reminding him of how much you sacrificed." "That's emotional blackmail, Eleanor. You've done your part. Now he belongs to me." The words didn't shout. They sliced. I opened my mouth, but air was all that came. She slid the folder across the table. Inside lay the deed to a small storage unit. "Put the old family things there. The ring, the clock, anything sentimental. We'll keep them safe. You don't need them cluttering your space." I closed the folder. "They're not clutter." "Then you're standing in Kevin's way. Don't you want him free?" "Free." The word echoed like the slam of a cell door. That night, Kevin repeated it. "Mom, Tiffany's right. You've already lived your life. It's our turn now." I had fed him those words once, when he wanted to drop out of college. I had said, "It's your turn, take it." How cruel that kindness could be twisted into dismissal. I sat awake, staring at my hands, once strong enough to turn fabric into suits, curtains, uniforms. Now they trembled over an empty lap. The collapse didn't come suddenly. It leaked, like a faucet you pretend not to hear. My client stopped calling. Maybe Tiffany whispered that my eyes were too tired, that my stitches skipped. Or maybe they simply drifted to newer shops. The machine grew cold. Groceries shrank from bags to single loaves. My body shrank with them. One afternoon in the market, the world tilted. A blur of faces, then the cool tile against my cheek. When I woke, Susan was pressing water to my lips. "You fainted," she said softly. "You need to eat." I nodded, but shame burned hotter than hunger. I learned the house in silence, how the floor creaked when you walked without television to cover the sound, how the refrigerator's absence made the kitchen echo like a cave, how the walls carried whispers longer when no one interrupted them. Sometimes, I argued with myself, maybe Tiffany's right. Maybe love has an expiration date. Maybe mothers shouldn't cling. But then the other voice whispered, "Sacrifice isn't a debt, it's a bond." Which one was true? Late one evening, I opened Arthur's letter. His script was careful, old-fashioned, as if the words had been rehearsed for decades. "Eleanor, I've never forgotten you. Life took us in different directions, but not a day passed without me wondering where you were. I'm in Boston now. I've built a life, but it always felt unfinished without you. If this reaches you, please call. I want to see you again." Tucked inside was a faded ticket stub from a county fair, the one we'd gone to as teenagers. We had eaten cotton candy, argued over the carousel horse, kissed once behind the Ferris wheel. He'd kept it all these years. My hands shook. A rope, thrown across 50 years, dangled before me. But even ropes require choice. Did I still deserve rescue? Or had Tiffany been right, that I was only a burden, a shadow too heavy for the living to carry? I placed the letter beside my tea. For the first time in months, the house felt less like a coffin and more like a waiting room. And here I will ask you, the ones listening. If someone erased your life piece by piece, your furniture, your work, your worth, would you reach for the rope from the past or let yourself drown quietly? The letter did not save me at once. Rescue is not a switch. It's a flicker, a hesitation. At first, I tucked Arthur's envelope under a stack of unpaid bills, as if old love could be treated like clutter. But clutter whispers. It waits. Days blurred. Hunger was no longer an ache but a hum in the bones, the kind that makes the walls tilt when you stand too fast. Susan kept knocking with plates of stew. pretending they were extra portions. Pride made me refuse sometimes, but hunger made me surrender most nights. Still, the letter pressed at me. One dawn, pale light on the kitchen tile, I opened it again. Arthur's words weren't pleading. They were steady, careful, like stones laid across a river. Come, walk, you won't drown. Inside was also a number. I stared at it for days, fingers hovering, never pressing the final digit. Then came the market day. I had coins enough for apples, only 2. The vendor's voice swam around me, his hand outstretched, the red fruit shining. Then the world buckled. My knees hit stone, voices blurred into a single alarm. When my eyes opened, Susan was crouched beside me, fear stamped across her face. Eleanor, you scared me half to death. I'm fine, I whispered, but we both knew I wasn't. That night, I dialed. It rang once, twice, then a voice I hadn't heard in 50 years, softened by age but unmistakably Arthur. Eleanor, I couldn't speak. Breath trembled like leaves. I thought maybe this would never reach you, he said, but you called. The dam inside me cracked. Tears I had stored like unpaid rent finally spilled. I didn't know who else to. You don't have to explain, he said gently. You just have to let me see you. When we met, it wasn't a grand reunion. No fireworks, just 2 old souls, both surprised the other was still alive. He had silver hair now, glasses perched low. His suit was pressed, but his hands were still the same, wide and certain. You look, he began, then stopped, because the word beautiful would have sounded like a lie. I was thin, lines etched deep. I look like life happened, I said. His laugh cracked open something inside me. We sat in a cafe, steam rising between us. He pulled from his coat pocket not just the fare ticket, but an old photograph. The one I had forgotten existed. Me on the carousel, laughing so hard the image blurred. I carried this through medical school, Arthur said. Every exam, every night I wanted to quit. And you became a surgeon, retired now. But I never retired from remembering you. The weight of those words was heavier than any betrayal. Because while Tiffany was busy erasing me, here was a man who had kept me alive in memory. Arthur did not rescue me in one day. He simply gave me ground to stand on. He insisted I eat. He bought me a coat against the cold, though I resisted until the cashier smiled at me kindly. He sat across from me with patience, as if waiting for a seed to decide it wanted to grow. But the true turning came weeks later, when Tiffany appeared again. She knocked without waiting for permission, her perfume slicing into the air. Still here, she said flatly, as if my presence offended the paint. Where would I be? I asked. Oh, I don't know. A smaller place. A care home, maybe. Kevin can't keep splitting himself forever. The word care home dropped like ice into my stomach. She paced, heels clicking. He's stressed, Eleanor. He needs freedom. Why not sell this place, give us the money, and move somewhere more manageable? I stared at her, then at the letter folded on the counter. Arthur's photograph peeked out, half a smile from the past. For the first time in months, I didn't feel small. No, I said. Her head snapped. Excuse me? This house is mine. I worked for it. I bled for it. And I will not sign it away. Tiffany blinked, caught off guard. You think you can stand in Kevin's way? I think, I said slowly, I can finally stand. She left in a storm of perfume and slammed doors. But the silence she left wasn't crushing anymore. It was steady. That evening, I called Arthur again. Do you remember what you wrote? I asked. I remember every word. Then tell me the last line. His voice was low, certain. You don't have to be alone anymore. I closed my eyes. For the first time in years, Maybe decades, I believed it. Arthur invited me to Boston. At first, I refused. I can't leave, I insisted. This is all I have left. He shook his head gently when we met again. Eleanor, a house isn't life. Life is who waits for you at the table. You've been eating alone too long. His words landed harder than Tiffany's insults ever had. Because they weren't meant to cut. They were meant to open. The next week, Kevin called. His voice was clipped, hurried. Tiffany says you embarrassed her. She's only trying to help. Help? I asked. By stripping me of everything? She just wants what's best. No, Kevin. She wants what's yours, and you've been too blind to see it. Silence. Then quieter. Mom, please. Don't make this harder. I almost broke. Almost agreed. Almost folded back into the woman who gave until nothing was left. But Arthur's letter lay on the counter still. I touched it, and I said, it's time I stop making things easier for everyone else. That was the true turning point. Not Arthur's return, not Tiffany's threats, but the moment I chose myself. From that night forward, the air shifted. Food tasted like food again. Laughter did not feel like trespassing. The house, though empty, no longer seemed like a coffin. I was no longer the victim. I was the gardener. And finally, I was ready to plant again. Arthur did not sweep me into wealth like a fairy tale. He invited me into dignity. That, in truth, was rarer. He showed me the townhouse where he lived, a place with wide windows, bookcases lined with decades of learning, and a dining table that never felt empty because his presence filled it. Stay a while, he offered. I hesitated. I don't belong here. He reached across, covering my hand with his. You belong wherever you are loved. It was such a simple statement, but after months of Tiffany's barbs, it landed like thunder. With Arthur's help, I saw doctors. I ate. My weight returned. My hair, once limp, began to shine. One afternoon, he brought me to a boutique. Choose something you like, he urged. I shook my head. Clothes are for women who still have reasons. Arthur smiled softly. You have more reasons than you know. I tried on a deep blue dress. The mirror startled me. The woman staring back wasn't young, no, but she wasn't broken either. For the first time in years, I saw Eleanor, not just Kevin's mother, not Tiffany's victim. That night, Arthur hosted a dinner at a grand hotel. The lights glowed gold, glasses chimed, music drifted like silk. He looked across the table, eyes steady. Eleanor, he said, I don't want you to live alone anymore. Share my home, share my life, not as a charity, but as my choice, as my love. I inhaled, breath shaking. A widow, abandoned, stripped of everything, and yet here was a second chance. Tears blurred the chandelier above. Yes, I whispered. And in that, yes, the revenge began. Not with knives or lawsuits, but with dignity reclaimed. Weeks later, Kevin called. His voice was jagged, raw. She left me, Mom. Tiffany's gone. My hand tightened around the phone. She took everything. Money, furniture, even the things from your house. Sold them, I think. I don't know what to do. His sob cracked through the line. Please, Mom. I need you. For a heartbeat, the old instinct surged. Rescue, fix, pour myself empty for him again, but I steadied. Kevin, I said, voice calm, I will listen, but I can't be the solution to every problem anymore. Silence, then a broken whisper. Can I come see you? The day he arrived, Arthur insisted on opening the door with me. Kevin stood on the marble steps, eyes wide. He had expected my small house, my sewing machine, my worn sofa. Instead, He saw glass doors, chandeliers, and me in that deep blue dress. "Mom?" he breathed, disbelief slicing through his face. Arthur stepped beside me, resting a hand lightly on my shoulder. "This," he said firmly, "is the woman I love and honor." Kevin blinked, stunned. For once, the power lay not in his hands, nor Tiffany's whispers, but in mine. We invited him in. At the table, he stared at his empty palms. "I lost everything," he murmured. "No," I corrected softly. "You gave everything away. You believed Tiffany when she told you I was a burden. And now you see what burden really looks like." He winced. But I didn't say it to wound. I said it to wake him. Arthur spoke gently. "Kevin, your mother's strength built you. Don't confuse love with chains. Don't confuse sacrifice with control." Kevin's eyes shone with shame. I don't deserve forgiveness." I reached across, my fingers grazing his. "Forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about choosing not to carry bitterness. I forgive you, but I will not return to the woman who gave until nothing remained. That Eleanor is gone." The reversal was complete. Tiffany had taken my furniture, my dignity, my son's loyalty. In the end, she lost everything, while I gained not only love, but myself. Revenge came not through shouting or punishment. It came through living, through refusing to die in silence. That evening, Kevin walked through Arthur's home slowly, touching the polished wood, the frames on the wall. He whispered, "She sold your clock, Mom, and the landscapes. I'm sorry." I closed my eyes. Yes, grief stirred, but then relief followed. Because those things had been stolen, yes, but so had I. And just as I was reclaiming myself, no thief could undo it. "They're gone," I said. "But I'm still here." Arthur slipped his arm around me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was pretending at strength. I was strength. Neighbors later whispered when they saw me again, stepping out of Arthur's car, wearing clothes that fit not just my body, but my soul. Susan smiled widest of all. "I knew you weren't finished," she said. "No," I told her. "I was just beginning again." That night, as I lay in a warm bed beside a man who cherished me, I thought of Tiffany, of her painted smile, her hungry eyes, her cruelty dressed as sophistication. She had believed erasing me was her victory, but the truth, the delicious, quiet truth, was that she had erased herself. If you have ever been cast aside, told you are a burden, made to believe your life has already been lived, remember this: revenge is not always fire. Sometimes, revenge is light. Sometimes it is simply living so well that those who discarded you cannot comprehend how you survived. And survival, in its quiet way, is the loudest answer of all. Kevin sat in silence long after Arthur had excused himself to take a call. His eyes roamed the marble floor, the high windows, the careful arrangement of books on the shelves. Finally, his gaze landed back on me. "You don't look the same," he whispered. I smiled faintly. "That's because I'm not the same." For years, I had been a woman bent beneath weight, mistaking sacrifice for chains. Now, across the table, I felt light enough to breathe freely. Kevin's voice broke. "I let her take everything from you, and then I let her take me." The words he had never dared admit spilled like confession in a chapel. He bent forward, head in his hands, shoulders trembling. For a long time, I said nothing. My son's repentance was not mine to manufacture. It had to be born. When he finally lifted his face, eyes swollen, I reached for his hand. "I forgive you," I said quietly, "but forgiveness doesn't mean I return to the old role. I'm your mother, yes, but I am also Eleanor, and she deserves her own life. The weeks after his visit were calmer than any season I could recall. Arthur and I walked through parks at dusk, leaves crunching underfoot. Susan joined us sometimes, carrying roses from her garden, teasing Arthur about stealing the neighborhood's favorite widow. Kevin called occasionally. His tone was softer, no longer entitled but cautious, like a boy relearning language. He asked about my health. He asked about Arthur. For the first time, he listened. One evening, he came with a single photograph, the old landscapes Tiffany had sold, found online by chance. "I want to buy it back," he said. "Not for me, for you." I touched the faded print, my throat tightening. "It's only a painting," I said, but my heart whispered, "It's also an apology." Arthur and I married in the garden behind his townhouse. It was simple, roses climbing a trellis, golden light spilling like benediction, Susan in a lavender dress fussing over the cake. Kevin stood near the back, awkward in a borrowed suit. When the vows were spoken, he pressed a hand to his face, and though he tried to hide it, I saw the glint of tears. Perhaps they were grief for what he had lost, perhaps gratitude for what he still had. Afterward, he approached Arthur. Their handshake was hesitant at first, then firm. I watched it with a heart both heavy and healed. Life did not become perfect. Tiffany never returned the money. The furniture was gone forever. But wealth, I discovered, could be rebuilt. What mattered most had already been restored. Dignity, love, and the knowledge that my worth was never dependent on anyone else's permission. Arthur and I began a small foundation in the city, helping women abandoned by families who thought them too old, too weak, or too burdensome. Each story we heard echoed mine. Each life we touched reminded me that survival, when shared, becomes strength. Sometimes at meetings, I looked around the room at faces lined with years and pain. "Respect isn't given by blood," I would tell them. "It's earned through love and kindness. And you, all of you, are worthy of it." One quiet evening, Kevin joined us for dinner. Arthur had made stew. Susan brought bread. Kevin sat at the table, glancing at the framed photograph Arthur had insisted on displaying. The carousel picture of me, 17, and laughing. "You look so free in that photo," he said softly. "I was," I answered, "and now I am again." For once, his smile was not weighed down by regret. It was simple, almost boyish, as though we had found a path back to each other. Not the same path, but one new and true. To those listening now, perhaps your story is different. Perhaps your betrayal came not from a son, but from a husband, a sibling, a friend. But betrayal cuts the same way, no matter who holds the knife. What matters is what you choose afterward, to bleed quietly in the dark, or to rise, stitch your own wounds, and walk back into the light. I chose the light. And when the waiter stopped me, whispering, "Be careful with your juice," I realized sometimes salvation comes from strangers, sometimes from lovers, sometimes even from the ashes of a son's repentance. But always, it begins when you decide your life is worth saving. If this story touched you, tell us in the comments. Have you ever faced betrayal within your own family? How did you find your strength again? Don't forget to subscribe to Tangled Heart Stories for more powerful dramas of sacrifice, betrayal, and those unforgettable turnarounds.